I seek recognition to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. The form of the resolution is as follows. Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. This is the uniparty for the American people watching.
Gentlelady will suspend.
Well, I'll play more of that for you in just a second, but that was Marjorie Taylor Greene being booed, and we'll get to moments of Republicans being interviewed, giving their thoughts, their unfiltered thoughts on Marjorie Taylor Greene as well. But the effort by MTG to oust Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, for reasons that we'll discuss again in just a moment, has ended in a pretty humiliating fashion, with the House of Representatives overwhelmingly, resoundingly slapping down this effort by Marjorie Taylor Greene that she's been threatening for some time, and sending her packing, at least in this effort. Now, I'll remind you that I'm no fan of Mike Johnson, but the reasons that MTG wants to oust him are as insane as it gets. She is demanding, one of the things that she said would potentially save his job is if he would lead an effort to defund the special counsel prosecution of Donald Trump, which would be a weaponization of their positions of power, Congress's, in trying to intervene in a prosecution to protect a political ally, the likes of which you rarely see, and it would be quite the undermining of the rule of law. That was one of the things. She also wants to cut off all aid to Ukraine because she's just absolutely crazy on that issue, and some other things as well. And so she should have been rejected here, even though it feels weird that Democrats saved Mike Johnson in this moment. It made sense given what was being brought forward and who was bringing it forward. Now, before saying more and before getting to some interesting clips of Republicans roasting MTG, here's more from this. Oh, and by the way, while you're watching, please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel by clicking that subscribe button. Easy, simple, free, but helps us grow the show, plus the like button and the alert bell.
Order. Order. The gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized.
Whereas the House Republican Conference elected Mike Johnson on October 25th, 2023, after 3.5 weeks of trying to decide on a new Speaker of the House.
Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
House will be in order.
You know, I think everywhere Marjorie Taylor Greene goes, that should be the reaction. Just ruthless boos constantly. Here's this from NBC News. Speaker Mike Johnson and his allies beat back a dramatic effort by far-right Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to oust him from power on Wednesday, ending for now months of threats against his speakership. The lopsided vote to table or kill Greene's motion to vacate the speaker's chair was 359 to 43. Just 10 Republicans voted with Greene, 7 Democrats voted present. And so again, a bunch of Democrats did jump in to prevent the ouster of Mike Johnson. But again, given the circumstances and the insanity of what Marjorie Taylor Greene was demanding and the alternative, I'm sure the person that would be required by the MAGA world, that's even more MAGA than MAGA Mike, would be horrible. Maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene herself. Before discussing more on that, here is Mike Lawler.
Moscow Marjorie has clearly gone off the deep end, maybe the result of a space laser. But this type of tantrum is absolutely unacceptable, and it does nothing to further the cause of the conservative movement. The only people who have stymied our ability to govern are the very people that have pulled these types of stunts throughout the course of this Congress to undermine the House Republican majority. Moscow Marjorie has...
And you hear him as the clip repeats saying Moscow Marjorie, and that gets to what I previously mentioned, the insanity of the demands from her, included just completely cutting off any aid to Ukraine as they defend themselves. And as I've said, Marjorie Taylor Greene pretends like this is in the interest of peace, trying to further the talking point of the United States is currently funding the continuation of a war when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is just absurd and deranged, given that Russia could choose any day of the week to end this war by ending their invasion, but they choose not to. And thus, because Ukraine should defend themselves and need help in doing so in the form of aid, that's what we've been doing. And if we were to stop, how you think that would motivate Russia to stop doing what it's doing when their ability to enact their ambitions would have just become easier? Doesn't make any sense to me. But MTG pushes those pro-Putin talking points rather often, and that's where she got her name, Moscow Marjorie. I think Ken Buck made that pretty popular. Now you hear Mike Lawler there. Then you have another Republican congressman here.
Listen in. 1 second, Jake. We got reaction.
Yeah, go.
Is calling for a motion to vacate. Listen, all of us in life get to decide how we handle disappointment. You can be productive or you can be destructive. Ms. Taylor Greene is choosing destructive. We know that this motion is not going to do one thing to make America stronger. It's not going to do one thing to deliver a conservative victory. It's going to sow discord and dissent. And by the way, it's going to fail. She is engaged in a failing act of political theater. What you have here are some of the Main Street members who are the adults. And we're going to do what adults do. We are going to ignore the tantrums and instead work to actually govern this country.
Listen in. 1 second, Jake. We got reaction.
Yeah, go.
And that clip looping there as well. And so, yeah, it's great to see this is the ending. It is a humiliation for Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's going to try to portray it as an awesome chance to get a list of names of people who came out in support of Mike Johnson. But as I've said now in so many segments in the lead up to this, she's in her little MAGA bubble. She thinks her logic makes sense or thinks it makes sense to her base. But in reality, while maybe that might be true for a very small sliver of the country, the broader American public, even a bunch of Republicans, are just thinking, what? Gosh, stop the shouting from MTG. Just sort of stop with all this. Can you get back to work and do some stuff for us? And again, every time this comes up, I have to emphasize the contrast between the governance of Democrats and the governance of Republicans in this MAGA moment, where MAGA has taken control in large part of the GOP, or at least has caused it to be so unable to function because of the presence of MAGA in any way that resembles a serious governing party. And we've seen that the entire time Republicans have been in the majority in the House of Representatives. Their only accomplishments are a failed impeachment effort against Biden based on baseless, ridiculous claims, a Twitter files hearing, and what else? Ousting Kevin McCarthy. Woohoo. What an incredible time in the majority. Whereas Democrats spend their time racking up a list of achievements that is quite literally historic. So that should be something that we vote based off of in this upcoming election. Then here's more from Marjorie Taylor Greene on the House floor.
Whereas Speaker Johnson fully funded special counsel Jack Smith's witch hunt and 91 indictments against President Trump, our Republican presidential nominee. House Republicans could have used our power of the purse to stop this, but Speaker Johnson didn't even let us try. Whereas Joe Biden's weaponized DOJ is arresting a new January 6th election protester every single day and putting nonviolent political enemies, including veterans, mothers, and fathers, and grandparents in jail for years. And the fifth January 6th defendant has now committed suicide. Whereas our pro-life Christian conservative Republican Speaker Mike Johnson fully funded the Department of Justice as...
Okay. So in her argument for why Mike Johnson should be ousted, she's fixating on the Department of Justice should have been defunded. That's what she's arguing for. Think about, I, for example, opposed defund the police. I also recognize that it was not as prevalent of a movement as some people try to portray it to be. And that meant that I didn't spend a bunch of time obsessing over it, but it was obsessed over by the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene. But now she's the one advocating for defunding the police, federal law enforcement. She wants the FBI defunded. She wants the DOJ more broadly to be defunded, just because it dares to enforce the law when the person potentially violating the law is named Donald J. Trump. And we can't have law and order in this country if the power of the purse people use that power to prevent organizations from enforcing the law if that means enforcing the law with someone who is powerful within that given party. Things will fall apart. And that's what the precedent is that she's trying to set here, and what she's trying to enact and trying to force Mike Johnson to do, which is, again, defunding the DOJ just because it dared to hold accountable Donald Trump or dared to hold accountable people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, etc. And that is frightening. It's something that exemplifies just how extreme MAGA is, and Marjorie Taylor Greene in particular is. And my message to some of those Republicans who are speaking out against her is that you're allowing your party to become this MAGA, and thus then you will continue to be embarrassed, and your governance will be obstructed, and actually trying to do some things that you can run on will become harder and harder because of the way that a lot of these even moderate Republicans are just sort of sitting back and allowing their party to become controlled by MAGA. And what I mean is, obviously, rarely do we see really aggressive. It's getting more often, but for a while, we would barely hear aggressive, outspoken critiques of some of these hardcore MAGA Republicans from within the party. But also a bunch of those Republicans who are really upset with the disaster that their party is in the House of Representatives, they're going to go and endorse Donald Trump, the king of MAGA, and they're going to try to get him elected. And so they're just furthering the very ideology that is deteriorating their own party's ability to be anything serious and to get anything done for the American people. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.